So the 4 control mechanisms we go through are breathe, talk, see, and focus. So breathing is used in a lot of places. This is certainly not something I invented, but this concept of square breathing, it is used in healthcare settings. It's used with first responders. It's used with combat folks who in the military. They even call it combat breathing. But it's square breathing, and it's really about the intent of it, to do an inhale, a hold, an exhale, and a hold. The amount of time you do that for, technically, it's, if you do it for a 4-second count on each, that's really effective, but it's much more about the intent. The pace and complexity of the decision-making that has to happen. And every time I go and see a different sport, and NASO has been great to expose me to the different sports and the officiating in it, but each one really has, like, the pace and complexity of decision making that has to happen is, I would say 60% of it, 70% of it is actually invisible to the spectator. So if you think of soccer officiating for just one moment, the decisions that you see on the field are fouls, no fouls, disciplinary sanctions, boundary line decisions. Those are the very overt kind of decisions that you see. The decisions that you don't see that make it really challenging are things like positioning, movement, communication with teamwork. In soccer, for the professional leagues, you have VAR. Right. The amount of decision making that happens in any given moment is not just foul, no foul. It's, am I in the right spot? Do I need to move? Where do I need to go? What's the next phase of play? Where's my next decision? What's the body language of these two players? And it's processing an absolute ton of stimuli, a huge amount of stimuli. I mean, that's where I became very scientific about it. And it's like, I'm going to make some effort. The more allies we have, the better. But one thing about banging your head against a wall as a neuroscientist is we know it feels really good when you stop. So you just find alternatives. Go around, go above, and you just make it happen because it's the right thing to do, and you just don't let any one person kind of stand in that way.
And now, Season 2, Episode 15, Letter N, Neurology. Join host Dana Pappas with special guest Dr. Sandra Serafini on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm your host, Dana Pappas. My co-host, Nana Costa, is not with us for this episode. We're at the halfway point of the second season of the podcast, and this will be the first time we really get into the science of officiating. On this episode, we'll be covering the letter N and talking about neurology. We're going to be looking at the brain stuff behind officiating with a true expert in both officiating and neuroscience. Our guest on this episode of the podcast is Sandra Serafini, or her friends call her Fini. I consider myself a friend, so I'm calling her Fini. She's a retired FIFA and collegiate soccer referee who officiated multiple NCAA Final Fours and international events. She is now a consultant for U.S. Soccer, working on the revamp of the evaluation system and the referee coach course curriculum. Fini has been called a pioneer in the soccer refereeing community and has been a heavily relied upon source for stress management information for officials in all sports, and has been a constant contributor in terms of data analysis and research in sports officiating. I've known this woman for a really long time, and I can honestly say she's not only one of the most brilliant people I have ever met, but also one of the funniest. And every time Feeny and I are around each other, we laugh a lot. Always good to see her and look forward to seeing her here next month. Feeny, my friend, welcome to the From A to Zebra podcast, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Dana. It is an absolute delight to be here. This is so cool. I love the name From A to Zebra, and you are one of the funniest people I've ever met. So when we get together, I think everyone just kind of walks away because it's like they're not gonna be able to get a word in. So
I think you're right. I think you may be onto something. And I will start this whole thing with saying, when you're in a room and you hear people talking about something's challenging and you go, well, that's not brain surgery. Feny's the person I know who could be like, well, yeah, you're right, it's not, because she's actually in neuroscience and neurosurgery and all of these things. So when you're sitting next to her and your degrees in, like, I don't know, political science and Spanish like mine is, and you're sitting next to a person who is like a neuroscientist, you're like, I just need to be quiet and let her talk. But
Nah,
most humble person I know,
nah.
absolutely amazing resume, but an even better person. So
Oh, you're sweet.
good to see you, my friend.
Oh, the running joke is I don't do brain. I don't. I'm not a neurosurgeon. I just tell them what to do.
Which is even better. I mean, that sounds kind of ideal. I don't know. That's funny. So, before we really get into the topic of the day, can you tell us about your officiating journey, how you got started, and kind of the road to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the officiating journey, I think is one that a lot of people have had as well. Started when I was a kid in CYO and refereeing volleyball and basketball and just to pick up a little bit of pocket money and things and played the whole, was playing soccer the whole time and playing volleyball, playing all the sports. And then if you fast forward a bit, once I got to graduate school, where we all save ourselves from a life of prosperity. I started refereeing again, literally to pay the rent. My husband and I were both in graduate school. Really, you just don't make any money being an RA. And so I started refereeing again. I picked it up again at an unsanctioned league called Rec Soccer up in. They paid every 2 weeks and withheld taxes, and I did a ton of games and literally paid the rent and put food on the table. So I think my officiating journey really started out of necessity. I think like a lot of people, and just to, get some extra cash on board. And then once we kind of transitioned into a semi-real job known as a postdoc, I became certified in the US and just kind of I had a lot of experience and I was a little bit older, so it just sort of took off from there. I really didn't have a lot of high aspirations. I thought, well, I'll ref the games in my area. I'll pick up games here and there. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. It was like riding a bike since I was doing it when I was a kid. And then eventually I had a couple of really good mentors that said, you could make a go of this. And I thought, oh, pshaw, like you're crazy. There's no way. And one of them said, you should start tailoring your shirts, and because the running joke is like they were all men's extra large kind of things.
Of course.
So you should start tailoring these things for when you're on TV. And I thought, you are out of your mind. And it's like, what TVs are here? There's like nobody even with, a phone recording anything. So it was really a couple of my mentors that sort of put it in my head that, hey, if I really want to get serious about it, there's a pathway for it. So, thought about it a long time, really knew about the commitment, and decided to jump in and give it a go. And then it just kind of went pretty quickly from there. From the time I was certified to the time I got to the national level was about 6 years, and then got onto the FIFA panel. And the year after I got citizenship, because you had to be a citizen of the country to represent that country on the FIFA panel. So got on the FIFA panel and was there for 4 years. Did a lot of fun tournaments. Got to travel the world, and it was just an amazing experience. A ton of work, really, really huge. I mean, it's a whole life commitment from training, watching your games, doing the self-analysis, having your peer network where you're just so immersed in it for everything. And so it was kind of like a second career, to be honest, but it was worth every minute of it. It was worth all the effort and the getting up at 5 a.m. to go to the track, in the dark, cold, get your sprint repeats in, and then would go to the lab after that, or go to clinic and see patients, and then still doing games. And sort of the fall season is really when the collegiate season started. And put a ton of miles on the car, ate at a lot of Waffle Houses at 2 a.m. along the way. And
Always tasty.
yeah, always great. The referee always got to pick where we ate. And so my crew always hated it. It's like, oh, we're going to Waffle House again. And I thought, Constantine Waffle is like the best
It's the
post-game meal,
best.
and had the
That's
best
the
coffee
Trey meal.
live after it was all done. So it was great for that as well. So yeah, I came off in 2009, I had a pretty short international career, mostly because of injury. So my had a hip injury that ended up needing surgery and things. So I ended up coming off the field when I needed to. It was like, okay, I can't do it at this level anymore. So got that fixed. Got that fixed up. Ref for about another year after that, after the surgery was done, and then just decided, okay, it's time to change roles, give back a little bit, and yeah, just give back in another way, but still wanted to stay involved. So I did
And
that.
you've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, I've really been doing it ever since at this point. So, yeah, the officiating career, I mean, it was so fun. It just brought you to so many new places, and
For sure.
the games kind of blur a little bit, but all the people you meet along the way, like there is a couch on most continents that I could still flop on, if I needed to. So the friends, the relationships you build and the friends you make there are really that lasts a lifetime. And it's really interesting now to see, now that I'm kind of in the role that I am now, is a lot of the players that I used to referee now have gone into broadcasting.
Oh, that is
And so I,
interesting.
yeah, and so I end up seeing them at matches like in a totally different role, or interact with them in a totally different way. And so that's really been fascinating, where you kind of see the change of generation and the changing of the guard. So that's been rewarding in its own way as well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned having to get your citizenship. So we're all about the Canadian guest on our show. We've had Terry Gregson, we've had Ron
Yeah.
Foxcroft. We've had some Canadians, and that's something that through NASO we get to see people internationally, which is really special. And you and I are currently on the NASO board together, and those relationships and friendships, and getting to meet people from not just the United States, but across the globe who officiate are just, it's so special. So I just wanted to clarify when you had mentioned that. I was like, oh, she's a Canadian. So,
Yeah, yeah, and there's nobody more Canadian than someone who lives in the U.S. It is something special.
so as a sidebar, I was back in New Mexico about a week ago for my parents' anniversary, and they were watching, I believe it was a car race, and they were playing the Canadian national anthem, and I was singing along, and my parents both looked at me and they go, "Why do you know this?" I was like, "Hockey fan." I was like, "You watch ice hockey, you get to know the Canadian national anthem." But
Absolutely, it's still got it,
here a
still
little
got
bit.
it that the Oilers lost to Florida. There's no ice in Florida. I don't get it. I mean, I'm sure half the players are Canadian, but
We had mentioned in your intro a little bit, in your life outside of soccer, you were an assistant professor in the neurosurgery department of Duke University. Did you see any ways that your career in neurosurgery and neuroscience really intersected with officiating?
yeah, it kind of unintuitively, and I probably didn't realize it as much at the time as I do now, looking kind of from the outside in a bit more. I mean, one of those is what you would call, potentially life and death, and the other one is far, far more important than that, which is, officiating a game or the sport itself. So yeah, there's definitely parallels to it. I mean, I think the biggest similarity is having to make really split second decisions. And you plan, in both environments, you plan out everything that you can. You have kind of an expectation of how things will go, and what the procedure, is going to happen. And think about, okay, if something is going to go wrong, where and when are the most likely places for that, and planning out kind of, the response to it. So that's very much an officiating kind of mindset, I think, as well as you're preparing for a game. And when we prepare for a surgery, it was, very much the same way. You do a lot of preparation on the front end. You're trained, to get through the procedure or the game, however you like to think about it. And you prepare yourself to be ready if things don't go as expected. So those things were very, very, similar in that sense. Strangely enough, I mean, I think our patients complained less than a lot of the coaches did. And so the perspective, it did a little bit to the perspective. You still have to take everything really seriously in the match, but in the grand scheme of things, like, does a throw in at midfield really matter this much? Like, our brain tumor patient didn't complain this much about their third surgery, and you're,
That's perspective.
kind of going crazy on a throw in. So, depending on the situation, you have to understand too that, for coaches, that's their livelihood. I mean, totally get that. That's their livelihood. So every call matters. Everything you do matters there, because the stakes are very high for people's livelihoods and standings and everything like that. So you still take it seriously, but you need to be able to step back from it a little bit and keep things in perspective. But I think in that sense, that the training that I had on the neuroscience side and the medical side allowed me to bring that perspective. And so I could step back from it, not take it personally. And it's like, no, this is now going to become about, just behavior and decorum. because sometimes you have to deal with patients or families that get really emotional, understandably so. So again, it's understandably so, but people's emotional responses and things, they can't get out of their own head in their own space for whatever reason. And I think the training in both of those things really, I had to bring the perspective of, my medical training to the field a little bit, just to be able to kind of step back and look at things really objectively. And then I would bring a lot of refereeing experience actually to, to the clinic and, dealing with patients and their families at really, really high stress moments. And sometimes you need to, diffuse their emotional states and calm them down and, just bring them back to a place where a conversation is productive at that point. And again, I'm kind of looking forward to the things that are going to get better. And sometimes, especially in the types of surgeries we did, a lot of our patients got a lot better because we were primarily working with epilepsy patients. And so we had some amazing stories where patients for the first time could get a driver's license, or go back to school or actually hold down a job because their seizures were cured. So that part was really satisfying. And then you have different victories when you have brain tumor patients, and your milestones are different and your victories are different. So again, being able to kind of navigate the emotional state of the people that are surrounding either the patient themselves or surrounding the patient. My refereeing experience actually came in really, really handy, just when we needed to refocus things and look at a very concrete goal, immediately ahead of us. So they ended up kind of influencing each other in some really unexpected ways, I think.
That's interesting because it wasn't even something that was going on, consciously for you. It was just in the subconscious. You've got this thing happening where you're using your referee skills and, talking to somebody about a brain tumor, and it's like, how do those even go together? And but that perspective is, as a lot of people that listen to this know my sister's a brain tumor patient, and has had it debulked, and they couldn't do the operation all the way and get it out all the way, but man, having a loved one go through that, it does give you a perspective on what's really important, and some of the things that you used to get super upset about just don't even matter anymore. So being able for you to have that perspective, having been on that side with patients and their families and seeing the emotional pull on that, and then, like you said, seeing somebody freaking out about a throw-in, you're going, wait a second, like what are you really that stressed out about? But also having the empathy of this is the coach's livelihood. So I think the empathy applies in both
Yeah.
cases, and that's probably a real strong suit for you to be able to have that in both of the worlds that you
Yeah,
worked
I
in.
think it's been helpful, and I think just the other parallel is really just making decisions under acutely stressful conditions, where you prepare as much as you can, so you keep that acute stress level down, or you at least plan out how your resources are going to meet those demands. But I think making those quick decisions in the moment, under kind of acute stress, because it has such a huge impact. I think that was also the parallel. So I don't know, maybe I'm just an adrenaline junkie or something. I'm not quite
You
sure.
might be.
Yeah, I might
Maybe a
be.
little bit.
But that's where I always found a really comfortable space for myself, of being that very super focused in the moment, tapping into my training, tapping into my wits, because you can't plan for everything. And so just being able to assess a situation really quickly, figure out, you don't even have time to figure out the options. And it's just kind of, after all that training, it's sort of that gut reaction of like, this is the best way forward. This is going to have the best outcome. And then just like refereeing, it's, you make your best faith decision in what you have based off of your training, and hopefully a little bit of an innate talent that comes with it. But you have to really believe and have confidence that the decision you're making is kind of your best case. It's your best faith effort to make the outcome go right. So I think that's sort of another parallel that, again, much easier from the outside looking in now. Probably didn't realize it at the time.
You're going, wait a second. I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't realize they were parallel, but I mean, great answers. So a little bit off of the neurology brain stuff,
Mhm.
your background within the soccer officiating community and the overall officiating community is rather robust. One of the things that jumps off the page for me is the work that you've done around the challenges women face in officiating. Do you see the sport environment as any better now than it was 10 or 15 years ago in terms of women in officiating?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I think we've started to break through. I mean, you see it in all the different sports, and different sports have come along at different paces, I guess, at different rates. So, some of the earliest ones, like you saw in the NBA, with Violet, that was sort of like, my goodness. And ironically, in the soccer world, before the women's leagues kind of came along, we all did the men's games, and we were kind of considered normal there. And so it's been a little bit strange in the sense that as the women's leagues have gotten more prominence, that for a while the women officials actually just got pushed over there. I'm trying to think how to frame this. We were pushed there, which is, being able to referee the professional leagues is an amazing thing, but having others decide what you will do and what you automatically will not do or
Sure.
cannot do became really strange. It was almost like we stepped, we went backwards for about 10 years. Because it was like, oh, well, you can go over there and do that instead, and we'll leave the boys to the boys. And so it ended up taking, actually, ironically, a lot of effort to break past that and just say, well, everybody just needs to do everything. And so when you saw that at the professional leagues, where the women were kind of getting put over to, the women officials were getting put over to the women's leagues more by definition rather than by ambition of the official themselves or talent or merit or whatever it was sort of like a pathway got cut off.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of a fascinating thing. So we ended up, especially once I came off the field, really having to fight those battles of, some of the men are really well suited to the women's games, and that's where they want to be, and that's fantastic. And some of the women are really suited to the men's leagues, and they have the talent for that, and that's fantastic.
And they've been doing it for 10 years already anyway.
Yeah, it's like everyone forgot. And when there was a little, like a couple years when the first women's professional league, WSA, folded, and I can't tell you how many times I got the question, well, now where will you referee? And I said, the same places I've been refereeing the whole time. So it very quickly became this kind of unconscious bias of, if you're a women official, you can only do X, Y, and Z because of your gender. And I thought, well, that's absurd. I mean,
That is.
yeah, I don't see women neurosurgeons only operate on women patients.
Female patients.
Yeah, it was just absurd. So I thought, well, no, I mean, if we can do all these other things, why is it only in this sports environment that it turned into 1850? Like, that just made no sense. So I spent a lot of time, having a lot of conversations, and, you bring over the people you can, and you figure out quickly where you don't want to waste your time, and you go around them. I mean, that's where I became very scientific about it. And it's like, I'm going to make some effort. The more allies we have, the better. But one thing about banging your head against a wall as a neuroscientist is we know it feels really good when you stop. So you just find alternatives. Go around, go above, and you just make it happen because it's the right thing to do, and you just don't let any one person kind of stand in that way. And so I just saw my job as really clearing the path for the women who had the talent, who had the commitment, and had the ambition, and let it take it where it went. So we finally started to see that breakthrough. Again, I would say probably around 2014, 15 in the professional soccer world. And since then, it's, I think it can't be understated. Like, all of those little steps where you saw, Stephanie Frapper do the UEFA, and you saw BB Steinhaus do the first division, Bundesliga, which I went to her game for that. She's,
how cool.
oh yeah, we've known each other for ages. When she finally, after several years of working Division II, despite getting the top rankings, despite all the things on paper, she was prevented. Finally, she was given an opportunity, and she hit it out of the park. So I went there for that. So you started to see it a little bit more. We started with one assistant referee, Marlene Duffy, in MLS, brought back after, can't remember how many years. And now it's normal. All those struggles, and then certainly the World Cups made a huge difference. So this became an initiative, and from Carrie Seitz primarily, who's now the VP of refereeing for U.S. Soccer, and it was a long-term thing, and it was just a constant asking, Well, why not? Why not? And so every reason that people come and think of, it's like, well, no, that you have to show them that that's really not a valid reason. You break those reasons down, one by one, and just keep pushing and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing for it. So before the women got into the men's World Cup, you saw it at the Confederation level. So, and at the Confederation level, there was a big push at the national level. So it really had to kind of keep digging down. And that's really important because that visibility really drives the decision making for the people at the local level. Like, we are not going to get women in the MLS if they're not going to get any games at the youth level. And so the visibility of where women officials are at those professional levels, at those levels where you see it streamed or on TV or what have you, that has a huge impact on the risks that people are willing to take at those lower levels. So it's just eventually kind of clearing the path, and it's putting in the work. Honestly, that doesn't happen by itself. It puts in the work. It's acknowledging and recognizing the people who are doing it, and it's taking to task the folks that aren't, and having the real conversations of why not. I mean, there's been more than once where I've said to assigners for kind of these semi-pro leagues or what have you, and I said, look, if it all goes pear-shaped, I said, just tell whoever you report to that it's my fault. I'm like, what do I care? I mean, they're not going to fire me. So it's like that, the risk that people feel.
Sure.
And but why they feel it's a risk was always my question. Like, why is this more risky, than putting this guy on? And if it goes pear-shaped, it's not like you're not going to have any guys do any more games. It's like, oh my God, this left-handed referee screwed this up. It's like, well, we can never have a left-handed referee ever again. I mean, it's absurd when you think about it. But for gender, it's still very much a representation. So any one official who's female ends up representing everybody,
That's
and
right.
so it ends up being a lot more pressure for that person, because as they go, everyone else goes. It's a really peculiar thing that we still run into now and again. But I've got to say, compared to 10 or 15 years ago, I think we are finally approaching normal, which is fantastic. I mean, you can kind of exhale now. Like, it's very normal, to see women and men on crews of both men's and women's professional games, not just in soccer, but I think across a lot of sports. So, the sky's still above our heads. Still getting in by talent and merit, and they're still accountable based on performance. And strangely enough, it just works the exact same way.
It sure does. And you hit on so many points that are so valid. First of all, it's fascinating that women were on the men's side in soccer because there was no women's professional soccer, and then once it became a sport, then it was, now the women have to go over there. But what nobody ever thought is, we've seen men working women's sports forever, but it's just unheard of for women to be in men's sports. I remember being at the state association when I'd put women on boys basketball games, and everybody would act like I had just committed some sort of a crime. And then it just, once people understood, wait, this official's just as good as that official, it just became normal. And people didn't gasp when they saw the female official on the football crew anymore, because it was like, well, she's there because she is good and she's working and she's doing all the things to be on that state tournament crew or whatever. But I think that the word normal is a really good word. And there was about a year ago where a state association had posted an all-female basketball officials crew on a boys game, and everybody was like, oh, this is great, this is great. But then there was one guy who posted, he's like, well, I don't understand why this is such a big deal. And I'm like, trust me, we don't want it to be a big deal. We want it to be normal. We want it to be just another assignment. But until all assigners have that mentality of, this, we're assigning by a last name, oh, it's Pappas and Serafini on that crew, let's roll.
Mm-hmm.
By talent instead of by gender, then that's why we have to make it a big deal, because it's still something that isn't normal, but it's getting closer.
Yeah, I think it is getting closer.
I think it is too. I think it's becoming more accepted, and people are still going to make snarky remarks, and we know what to do with them. I mean,
were they talking? I mean,
exactly. So I think that it's just, soccer has to be different though, in the sense that that's what you were doing all along, and then it ended, and then you had to kind of rebuild that. Yeah. So I didn't ever think of that, but that's an interesting dynamic that you had on the soccer side of things.
Yeah, I've always been of two minds of the all-female crew. I mean, on the one hand, yes, we want to celebrate that. with the hashtag about bloody time.
Right.
I always kind of wondered, who is that benefiting? Is it benefiting the officials really, or is it just putting more pressure on them and pointing them out as something that's not normal? That's really where my sentiments lean to. It's like, well, yes, let's celebrate because they're doing this, high level game and what have you, but at the same time, it relies on an assumption that the women are other or don't really belong. So let's celebrate that they're there because really they don't belong. And so I've always struggled with that sentiment. And I've also struggled with the undue pressure that it puts on those officials as representative of the entire gender, just to prove to whom I don't know that it can be done. So I'm still of two minds on that. I struggle a little bit. It doesn't take anything away from the accomplishment. But why not celebrate, every crew that's doing a final because they're doing a final? I mean, and again, who cares? Oh, one of them's left-handed. One of them has blue eyes. I mean, who
Oh my
cares?
God.
Who
Not a
cares?
blue-eyed
One
official.
of them has 6 toes on their foot. Like, who cares? Like, it's just, I think it's this, I understand the reaction to it because of where we've kind of come from and what we've had to, fight against. But at the same time, like, can we just get over it? And I think the best compliment we can pay to officials is people have gotten assignments because of their talent and merit.
Because they're good and they deserve to be there. Yeah, exactly.
Why don't, so maybe we'll get there one day. We'll see.
I
We'll
hope
see.
so.
Yeah.
And I think you and I are both very similar as far as how we see that. Because for me, it was always at the high school level, showing little girls what they can do,
Sure.
and
Gotta see
normalizing
it to be
female
it.
officiating.
Absolutely.
So I've got that mindset, but I have also the same mindset that you do. And I mean, usually I'm pretty hard line on what I feel and think, but I waver there. I'm not gonna lie. I'm
Yeah.
a
And I think the
I'm
same
a
thing,
10th grader.
yeah. And I think the same thing comes up with, like women's programs or, women's development programs, women's initiatives. Like there's a great one going on right now. The Women's Initiative is part of U.S. Soccer, and it started with, I think, 10 people. And now is at like, 5 or 6 or 700 or something.
Oh wow.
And I've always, so I started at pro as like the women's manager. It's like, Fini, you're in charge of all the women across the US and get them into, no budget, no personnel, no nothing. Blank piece of paper. And it's like, okay,
Good luck.
go make it happen. Now it's much more organized. It's supported as a program initiative. And so again, I've been asked that quite a bit. And I said, well, I always ask, well, what's the purpose of it? Is the purpose to separate them out? In which case, we don't want to separate them out. I think it can be valuable for the networking opportunities, for sure, to gather people that are going through similar experiences to build a community. Absolutely. And yeah, there's some nuances in what women still face in officiating that can really be best addressed when we're together as a community. And so for those reasons, I think it's phenomenal. And I think when it gets that momentum, again, it brings up the visibility and I think makes people a little bit more accountable. So the Women's Initiative that is in U.S. Soccer right now, part of the purpose of it is to provide the match opportunities that the women are not getting back locally in their home states. And through that, and Nami Emazumi, a FIFA referee in Japan, she's running the Women's Initiative for U.S. Soccer and is doing an amazing job. So shout out to Nami. If
Love
you're a
it.
soccer official,
We
join
love
the Women's
shout outs on this
Initiative. Yep,
podcast.
go to the U.S. Soccer website, go for the Women's Initiative there.
Love
So
it.
she's doing a phenomenal job. But I think in the last 6 months, I think she's had a 20% increase in the number of regional referees in the U.S. Granted, the numbers were not humongous to start, which is one of the reasons we need this. But in
Right.
6 months to have a 20% increase like that is
In
phenomenal.
anything.
In anything, absolutely. So for that, it's absolutely phenomenal. So, if it's for those purposes, I'm all for it. If it's for the purpose of, hey, let's get together as a sidebar here to build community and network, absolutely. If people are thinking about it, well, let's just put the women in this bucket over here and do the training and they will just be a separate thing, then I think it does more harm than good.
So, Feeny, we kind of cheated on the topic of today and turned it neurology, really, so we can
Yeah.
talk about the mental aspect of
Sure.
officiating. We already had a letter, so I had to move you over a letter. So, what are the most challenging mental aspects of officiating any sport?
Yeah, up for debate. There's been awesome arguments for that. If I had to pick one for Desert Island, I would say it is the pace and complexity of the decision making that has to happen. And every time I go and see a different sport, and NASO has been great to expose me to the different sports and the officiating in it, but each one really has like the pace and complexity of decision making that has to happen is, I would say 60% of it, 70% of it is actually invisible to the spectator. So if you think of soccer officiating for just one moment, the decisions that you see on the field are fouls, no fouls, disciplinary sanctions, boundary line decisions. Those are the very overt kind of decisions that you see. The decisions that you don't see that make it really challenging are things like positioning, movement, communication with teamwork. In soccer, for the professional leagues, you have VAR. Right. The amount of decision making that happens in any given moment is not just foul, no foul. It's, am I in the right spot? Do I need to move? Where do I need to go? What's the next phase of play? Where's my next decision? What's the body language of these two players? And it's processing an absolute ton of stimuli, a huge amount of stimuli, and actually making decisions on almost everyone. Now, as you get more and more experienced, you kind of learn to dismiss very quickly which stimuli don't need a decision, and that's what helps the game slow down a little bit. But even for the experienced officials, the amount of stimuli that has to be processed in any given moment and acted upon with a decision, I think is what makes refereeing really, really special. It's unlike really any other vocation or career that I've seen. And I think that's why when you get bit by the bug, that's part of what that bug is being put into the middle of having the responsibility to process all of these things around you and constantly make decisions and do it confidently and with authority and trying to keep everyone equally unhappy with whatever that decision ended up being. And I think that's what really draws people to it. And I think that's one of the most challenging.
That was such a great answer, because you don't think about that. If you're a fan, when you see a football official throw the flag, that's a decision. Right. And you think that those are the only decisions, is the flag or the whistle in basketball or a yellow card in soccer or whatever the case may be. All of the things that you just talked about, a lot of this podcast is about the behind the scenes of officiating, and your answer was just so much about that behind the scenes in one response. So now we're going to take it even further. Mm-hmm. So with your background, what are some tricks and tips you have for officials, regardless of sport, when it comes to getting our heads right before we take the floor, field, pitch, mat, pool deck, whatever it is we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, so we could do like a 3-day course, on this. To summarize it, when you're this term of getting your head right. I mean, you have to think of kind of the longer arc to build resilience and get yourself prepared physically and mentally for kind of these high intensity environments where you're making a lot, processing a lot of stimuli, making a lot of decisions. So there's sort of this foundation that happens long term, which is the good sleep and physical fitness and good eating habits, nutrition, all of those things that form your base. Then when you get to the kind of acute event, that acute environment, there's a lot of tried and true things that we see a lot of times in Referee Magazine, but all of those tips and tricks of do your homework and know the people and know your problem children and know your leaders and, know your coaches and know the teams and know the tactics. All of those things are really a means of preparing your brain to recognize something similar in the game that you're about to do. So a very, very old, kind of factoid in neuroscience is that you recognize things much more quickly than you identify them. And everybody knows that. Science even went on and proved it. So we know this. We know this as scientific, from the scientific literature, that when you have to identify something, it takes longer to do that than it does to recognize something that you're familiar with, even tangentially. So a lot of what goes into preparation for a game and getting your head right is how much can you mentally rehearse that makes it so you can recognize something similar in the game you're about to do. So one of those things, now you can branch out to that. Some of that is external stimuli. So things like the tactics. Okay, what happens if this team, goes up by 2 goals? They're going to, depending on the situation, do they change to a defensive shape? Okay, now I'm going to be able, if I have that prepared mentally, I'm going to recognize when it happens. And from that, now I can adjust my positioning accordingly. Or now I can predict the types of fouls that will occur. If you can get down right to a specific play. So when there is, a turnover that happens, depending on what part of the field it is, I can start to predict what are my next most likely decisions. That's going to come from analyzing my games. It's going to come from analyzing the teams. That's going to look at the history. That's from knowing the players. But ultimately, all of those extra bits of information come down to what can I do to minimize the number of things I have to identify in the moment? Because those take longer and they take more brain resources. And when you have to focus like that, then it doesn't leave room for much else. So the take home, bumper sticker version of this is like, what can you do to not be surprised in the game? Because the game will always provide those, no matter what.
No matter how prepared you are.
No matter how prepared you are, the game is still going to give you 1 or 2 surprises where you could have 600 years of collective experience and you get together and it's like, I have never seen that before.
I don't know what that was.
But if you can minimize that, then the resources that you have on hand can deal with it really quickly. And as a 1-off here or 2-off. If you don't prepare, you're doing that constantly. What ends up happening is you end up falling behind. You can't process all of that all the time at that level. You can't identify constantly throughout the game because your brain will explode physically.
Now the train is off the tracks.
Yeah, you won't see it because your skull is there, but your brain will just explode. And then that just cascades down. And we don't have medicine for that. So that cascades down into all kinds of physiological acute stress responses. It cascades down into psychological stress responses, and things just fall apart at that point. So the less you need to identify in the game, the more successful you'll end up being, the more resources you'll have to process that. But in order to make those 1 or 2 offs and have the brain power to kind of do that, the more the rest you have to maximize as much as possible, being able to recognize what's happening in the moment. And being able to pull on your training and your experience. So it's not going to always be exactly the same, but it's going to be similar enough to be, it's like, okay, well, I've seen something like this before. I've seen something similar.
This is familiar.
Yeah, this is familiar. Yeah, it uses a lot less brain resources. It's much quicker. And when that happens, you feel like you have more resources than to meet the demand in the moment. So you're calmer. Your selective attention can focus on that really quickly. If something else, there's another stimuli there, you still have plenty of resources, so you can kind of deal with it in a much better way and look confident while you're doing it, as opposed to that look that we all get now and again. I was like, what the hell is going on?
Deer in the headlights.
Yeah, that's what that is. That's just like at that point you're kind of like, I can't even identify what's happening in front of me right now.
Every casebook play that ever existed just happened all at once, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see this even from very, very experienced officials, where every now and again it's just like it just, the plate just blew up in front of me. It went big boom, fall down. I don't know what the hell happened.
And now there's blood.
Yeah. I mean, so it can happen. It can happen to anyone, but you really minimize those things by doing that mental preparation. So the main things are the mental preparation. It's really visualizing, almost with as detailed of a movie as you can get, almost with the script. And it's got to be not only the visual pieces of what you're got in this mental image, but it's also what are the feelings that you have cognitively in there. What are the sounds that you're going to hear? And also the kinesthetic portion of it is like, what is this going to feel like? If I start in this position and I see this happening, now I have to visualize not only the play itself, but visualize myself changing pace, visualize when I'm going to do explosive movement. As I get closer, all the players get bigger, strangely enough. So now what's that going to do, from my perspective? What's the angle of view that I need to get? What am I doing with my whistle? How loud am I blowing? How deep of a breath do I have to take to hit a really hard whistle? What am I doing with my body language? How fast am I reaching for the card? How long am I holding it up? You build this very, very detailed mental image of as much as you can. Sometimes it's helpful for newer officials, like just visual, if you can't do that for a 90-minute game, but visualize all your firsts, right? What is it going to feel, look, and sound like when you blow the whistle for kickoff, for the first throw in, for the first foul, for the first wall that you have to set for an attacking free kick? So one exercise that I do with a lot of officials, either who are newer or are doing experience, but are doing a new level, so that maybe they're in a new environment, is we visualize and really build up and script out, say, let's do all your firsts.
That's cool.
And something like that, I think, can be really helpful. Once you start doing that, it becomes much easier to do it for other situations. Your first penalty kick shootout, good Lord, there's no wrong way to get it right. Just get it right.
We don't care how you get there, just get there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So that's probably the most impactful way
That's great.
to do some of that preparation.
And you started touching on this, and now I'm going to take you all the way there. So I was fortunate enough to hear you at the 2024 Professional Association of Volleyball Officials Convention.
Oh, yeah,
So
that's so fun.
I know, which was awesome. And this is something that I really love, kind of sidebar. I love about PAVO is they always bring in officials from other sports to speak at their convention. You were there. They've had a couple of basketball officials there because they're understanding those bigger concepts really do transcend sport. So you were at PAVO last year. I got to hear you and it was awesome. And you had given a presentation about how officials can handle high pressure moments. So this is definitely tied into the quote neurology of the game. What are some of the key elements of that presentation in the form of advice to officials who might be listening in?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the shout out.
It's a great presentation.
Yeah, PAVOs, that was fantastic. And I really appreciated the opportunity to speak to them. I thought it was really funny when they talked about high stakes moment or high pressure moments. And so I asked them for some video because I said, I haven't done volleyball for a long time. And they would send video of their interaction with coaches. And coming from a soccer background, I thought, like,
You're like, that's not
I
high
missed
pressure.
it. It's like, well, the coach gave me this look. And I thought, wow. So it made me appreciate, though, that, everyone's got kind of like what's their normal go-to standard,
Sure.
what deviates from that and what needs attention for that. So the officials are obviously much closer to the coaches
Right.
in volleyball. But there were still a lot of parallels, particularly about new environments. So like that game in Nebraska that was at the outdoor stadium,
Yes.
it was like 100,000 people or something. Like, I don't care how many volleyball games you've officiated, you've never done that.
No, never.
So being able to kind of pull those moments, for their sport was important. And again, new environments in particular, as you're going up the ladder, provide a lot of fodder for that. So I would summarize the kind of the talk in their, understanding the physical sensations and kind of mental sensations that happen under acute stress. So it's a little bit different for everyone. There's very common ones on the physical side with what happens with your heart rate and blood pressure. Those jump up. You have a cortisol release in there, and the cortisol release really taps into what's called the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for our fight, our flight, and our freeze responses. So whether it's heart rate, blood pressure, what happens to your voice? It gets high, it goes fast, it gets loud. With your, muscle tone, it contracts. You can get tremors, you go stiff. What happens with your vision? Sometimes you can go tunnel vision. You lose your peripheral vision because you just end up getting tunnel visioned in the moment. Your sound orientation gets thrown off. It becomes much harder to figure out where sound is coming from. So it makes it harder to know what you're responding to. So those are kind of the main ones. There's a whole slew of them. And then just cognitively, where time can do funny things. So time comprehension changes. Things can feel like they're in slow motion, or they can feel like they're happening 900 miles an hour. so that time comprehension gets distorted. Some other ones are things that happen with your focus. So for some folks, their selective attention becomes like a pinpoint and they lose all the pertinent information that's surrounding that. And for others, it becomes kind of like this 19s light show at a concert where it's scattered all over the place and it's hard to focus on any one thing because you're task switching all over the place and you lose the ability to prioritize that information. So those are some of the very, very quick summary physical and mental sensations that can happen. So first of all is recognizing everybody's a little bit different. Everyone will have a different combination of those things. And the combination of those things can change depending on the event. Then we move, and the really important part of that is acknowledging that it's normal. These are responses that are very, very old from an evolutionary standpoint. This is what kept us from getting eaten by tigers. This is what helped us survive in the very, very old days. And so we can't turn those off just because it's 2025 and we're officiating a sporting event. That is how our bodies and our brains have evolved, is to help us survive. So acknowledging what yours are, what triggers those things for you, just acknowledging that it's normal. That is really your first step to like, okay, I know where I'm vulnerable. I know what happens to me. That's me. That's how I do me. That's how I roll. Next step is now we have some control mechanisms. And what we're looking to do is for the neuro nerds out there, is to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system so that we can put the brakes on that fight, flight, or freeze response. So the parasympathetic nervous system, the types of hormones that get released really just have basically a calming effect. So it counteracts the cortisol there, but it increases blood flow back to your brain. First of all, instead of contracting all your muscles and having all the blood flow go there, it helps you kind of with that relaxed response. So the 4 control mechanisms we go through are called breathe, talk, see, and focus. So breathing is used in a lot of places. This is certainly not something I invented, but this concept of square breathing, it is used in healthcare settings. It's used with first responders. It's used with combat folks who in the military. They even call it combat breathing. But it's square breathing, and it's really about the intent of it, to do an inhale, a hold, an exhale, and a hold. The amount of time you do that for, technically, it's, if you do it for a 4-second count on each, that's really effective, but it's much more about the intent. And sometimes we just don't have 16 seconds to tuck this in. But you may have 4 seconds, or you may have 2 seconds and do half a second on each one. But the intent of take a breath in, hold it, exhale it out, hold it before you do another breathe in is automatically going to reduce your heart rate, lower the blood pressure, get more oxygen in your lungs, which means more oxygen to your brain, which means you get smarter. And we use this technique with players as well when they get overly excited. First thing we say is just breathe. Just take a breath. I'm right here. I'm going to listen to you. Just take a breath. Get them more oxygen, get them smarter. So it really puts the brakes on, that square breathing really puts the brakes on that sympathetic response. Talk is about self-talk. So people know about self-talk. You can do procedural. So if you need to talk yourself through a procedure, say what are the offenses that could happen on a penalty kick and what are the restarts for it? Just very procedural, something that comes out of the rule book or the law book. And then the other one is affirming or motivational self-talk. In the present, short phrases that you know what to do, you've trained yourself for this moment, you can handle it, you can do it. And you use the first person. I know how to handle coaches with agita. I know how to talk to them. I know how to calm them down. And I also know what my limits are, when I'm going to stop trying, and just let them know what the consequences are if they continue. So that kind of affirmative and motivational self-talk is something else. But it's really a way, again, of refocusing your thoughts to the task rather than on the freak out part of what's happening. The visualization we talked about a little bit earlier, about kind of building these scripts and these mental movies. And then finally, the focus piece of it is about controlling your selective attention. So using cue words is really, really helpful there. So if you have a cue word like reset, focus, something like that, that is sort of the mental little rubber band elastic band that you snap against your wrist just to kind of reset yourself in the moment. But the other useful piece of that really plays into the whole idea of what is acute stress. And acute stress is when the demands feel like they outweigh the resources that you have. So if you're in a team crew situation, you can also use these cue words to your team to say, hey, like, I need you either to reduce the demands that are surrounding me in the moment. So I need you to take this person. I need you to take this person. Here are the things that you need to handle so the demands are reduced. Or here are the things that you need to do to pop in and increase our collective resources to kind of meet these demands. So for every sport, it's a little different. For every situation, is a little different. But you'll see the application of this in soccer, for example, when you have a mass confrontation. Absolutely all hell is breaking loose,
I
right?
was gonna say that never happens in soccer, though.
It's just this massive humanity, and you're supposed to figure out who are the worst offenders and what do I do with them? Because you can't give out, 11 yellow cards. I mean, you can.
And how do I restore order?
Yeah, you have to restore order. You have to kind of get your priorities. Who are the biggest troublemakers? Who ran in from distance? Who did the most severe thing, and just deal with those. And so for that, the demands are huge. If you're just the referee, you can't watch, you just can't see everything. You can't watch everything. So that's why you have kind of this triangle of control, is to increase the resources to meet that particular demand. If you flip it on its head a little bit, and you have some people kind of throwing a little wobbly along the touch lines, and you're dealing with something on the field as a referee, that's where you have the cue words to your team. Hopefully the training kicks in, but if not, because they're undergoing acute stress, you put in the cue words to kind of say, right, AR1, you're going to take the bench behind you. Fourth official, you take the bench on your left. You're going to deal with them. You're going to deal with them. That's going to reduce the demands on me, and now I have the resources to meet the demands on the field. The captains only is also kind of a similar response to that, where instead of getting mobbed and you just can't meet those demands and you can't pull your team out for all of that, the captains only initiative is a way to reduce the demands, is to kind of say, right, this is the person I'm going to speak with. Everybody else go boil some water. They have to leave the area and give space. And if they come into the space, then they get it. They get a card. But all of those types of techniques and initiatives are really ways to either increase demands to meet what's in the moment. To reduce the demands or to increase resources. So those go hand in hand. Because the players know, they know that if they mob you, they do this very deliberately to overwhelm the official, and then that way they can take control. Really, and then it becomes about who has control of the situation.
That was such a good answer, Feeny. That was a clinic in and of itself. But
that's a 3.5-day course at the
like 7 minutes. That was good. But I think about the square breathing. So I heard your presentation in December. I use that driving frequently now, the square breathing, because if you've ever driven, to those who live in the Indianapolis area, on I-65 or 465, it's Indy 500 every day. Everybody goes like 120 miles per hour, and if you don't keep up, you die. But there are times where I'm on the freeway and I am doing that square breathing because I know that my blood pressure is out of control. I could just feel it. And I learned that from your presentation. So I know it was about officiating, and it was high stress moments. I use it when I drive. So these things that we learn at officiating just apply to all aspects of our life.
They really do. Yeah. And
behind the wheel.
And it's amazing. I'm getting, it's interesting that more and more things outside of officiating that it applies to. So I just recently was in Toronto at a capital management company, and they're private equity people, and they're marketing and IT people and management teams. This is Fengate is the company, which happens to be owned by my brother. But anyways, went in for their what they call a fuel day just recently, a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, and I gave this talk, and I thought, I don't know. I mean, I barely keep my bank account sorted out. Like, I'm useless at this. And
how am I going to talk to these people about it?
And I thought, how am I going to connect this? But it ended up connecting of, like, what's your operating room and what's your stadium? So no matter what you do in life, we all have our own stadiums and our own operating rooms and our own places where we face this. So, even if you're outside of officiating, for these folks, like they were making, they were traveling internationally, making really high stakes pitches to potential clients. So the 30 seconds before they go into this room where it's a new environment with new people, with cultural unknowns, all of these things, they respond, their brains and bodies respond in a very predictable kind of way to this acute stress. And so we pulled in kind of what these responses are and what some control techniques were. So yeah, 3.5 day course went into about a 35-minute, presentation, but, really nice response. And I was just thinking, I speak to officials, like, even if it's not the sport that I do, like I can connect to that really quickly. But, no matter what you're doing, you have your own environments or your own events that trigger these things. And so the techniques work within officiating, they work outside of officiating. And yeah, I have to do a lot of square breathing myself on certain days. And it does help. Like
It does.
you
could just feel,
you have a smartwatch, you can watch your heart rate come down as you do it. It's really something.
I think, honestly, I think that's what's so special about officiating is the skills that you learn while you officiate really do help you in every other aspect of your life. And yeah, I've been fortunate to be around this business. I've never officiated, but I've been around it my whole life. And I think about how it just helps me in presentations, in dealing with conflict, with all of those things. And you're just like, why do I know how to do this? And it's because of listening to speeches and being at clinics and trainings and camps for almost 30 years. And it's just like, I'm better equipped to deal with things because of what I've learned from officiating,
It
which
has
is
a
really,
huge
really
amount of
special.
skill sets that that transfer and transcend. And by the way, we're signing you up for a digital referee course for U.S. Soccer right after this podcast.
Oh,
So you will be an official. And
now I
I
gotta
know people.
do some square breathing.
I know people in Indianapolis, so we are so getting you out there.
Oh my
We are,
gosh. I'll have
that's
to have
that's our goal,
both
our
knees
concrete
heavily
goal.
wrapped.
2025 is we are going to get you onto a game. You are going to blow that whistle and you're going to rock it.
Square breathing.
So visualize it. Just visualize
I know.
You're right
Hold on.
there.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch this whole podcast over. But
You're going to be out there. This is my personal mission
oh my gosh, now I'm
for it.
scared. But all right,
Got all the equipment, got the uniforms for you. We got you
man,
good.
no pressure at all.
No, absolutely none.
Zero, just
I'll be
zero.
your fourth official. There'll be like
Perfect.
zero problems on the benches. I promise.
That's all I need. Just keep them under control. So, Fini, this is the last question. We ask all of our guests this. So, the From A to Zebra podcast has a mission every week to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. What can you tell us about officiating that helps us to accomplish this mission?
So I think what I can say about officiating, certainly to excite your listeners, is that it sounds very cliche, but it really is. It's the best seat in the house. When you are into it and you feel this privilege of people trusting you to kind of make these decisions that keep them safe, keep the game fair, clear the path so that the players can display their talents. That's how I see officiating, is we're clearing the path so that the players can showcase their talents. And when they don't and they kick each other, we say, okay, stop, you can't do that. And the reason we do that, again, is to clear the path to make the sport the show and make the players the center, of what we do. So if you haven't tried officiating, I think that is one of the most exciting things about it. If you do officiate, that's why you get up and put the uniform on every day and go out to the fields and the courts and the pitches and the rinks and, and everywhere else and put up with some of the nonsense that we put up with. So don't lose that piece of it that helps us remember what a privilege it is to do. And I think also to remember that not everybody can do this. So the people that put themselves out there and do it are really, really special people. Because not everybody can do this. So I think it takes a really special person, to go through the training and the preparation, go out there, make themselves vulnerable, and then put up with some of the nonsense from people who haven't done what you've done. They haven't gone through they haven't put the time in. They haven't gone through the training. They haven't gone through the preparation. And it's easy to throw rocks, from the outside in. I mean, a lot of it is just the sounds of nature, kind of like who cares? But when it spills over into the field and, or the pitch or the court, it becomes much more challenging. So, just have as your center the privilege that it is to do this and then the responsibility that's been given. And, it's easy to deal with the people who are interfering when you keep at the center of like, here, I'm here to clear the path for the players to play. And so if there's twigs and branches in the path, which is what a lot of these folks are, sweep them away, out of the way, and we clear the path for the players again.
I love that. That's a great answer. We talk a lot at our level, at the high school level, about being guardians of the game, and that answer was exactly that, is clearing that path. The twigs and branches. I like that. Sandra Serafini, Fini, my friend, thank you so much for joining us.
This was so fun.
A to Zebra podcast. I can't wait to see you in Montgomery, Alabama at the NASF Summit. Good times to be had there. And
absolutely.
We get to celebrate officials and learn from officials while we're there, and hugs all the way around. It's like old home day, so I'm looking forward to that. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you so much for having me, Dana.
Thank you. It was fun.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra. Facebook, From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.